Who is Charles Haddon Spurgeon, known as the Prince of Preachers? This Victorian Calvinistic Baptist minister testified as a powerful gospel witness in his time, but his influence endures even today. So much so that Carl F. H. Henry, the dean of 20th century evangelical theologians, once called Spurgeon one of the evangelical Christianity's immortal. But what makes Spurgeon immortal? Whether you are new to Spurgeon or a familiar friend, here are a few things you should know about Charles Haddon Spurgeon. Born on 19th June 1834 in Kelvedon, Essex, to John and Eliza Spurgeon, he was the firstborn of 17 children, although unfortunately only 8 survived adolescence. A boy who loved books, he quickly became fascinated with John Bunyan's Pilgrim's Progress. However, Charles did not lose his own burden at the foot of the cross until January 6, 1850. That morning, a roaring blizzard forced Charles into the first church he could find, the primitive Methodist chapel on Artillery Street in Colchester, England. There, Charles heard a sermon delivered by a man who was, in his words, really foolish and who could not even pronounce the word correctly. Yet by God's grace, Charles looked to Christ and was saved. Soon thereafter, he moved to Cambridge, joined St. Andrew's Street Baptist Church, and began his ministry as an itinerant preacher. In October 1851, Charles was called to preach in his first church, Waterby's Chapel, and soon thereafter accepted the pastorate of New York Park Street Chapel in Southwark, London in April 1854. In 1861, Metropolitan Tabernacle opened and his ministry exploded, resulting in the founding of 66 para-church ministries. His remarkable ministry in London would last 30 years. Charles lived during the Victorian age where progress was prized virtue of the day. Born in the country when the 19-year-old moved to London in 1854, he was entering the largest and the most powerful city in the world. Charles Spurgeon was truly a unique instrument of the Lord Jesus Christ. One of the most remarkable aspects of his life and legacy is that he holistically exemplified Christian virtue in his ministry. With respect to evangelistic zeal, Charles' passion for evangelism is seen in every Christian-centered facet of his life, ministry, and sermon. During his lifetime, he preached the gospel to over 1 million people and personally baptized 15 new believers converted under his ministry. Furthermore, his sermons were translated into nearly 40 languages including Arabic, Armenian, Bengali, Bulgarian, Chinese, Czech, Dutch, French, German, Hindi, and so on. Called a 90s wonder by the Sheffield and Nottingham Independent, the boy preacher the fence took the world by storm when he arrived in London in 1854. The young preacher was a force to be reckoned with and provoked polarized reactions. On the other hand, Ilmus L. Magoon, the first biographer, said that when Charles arrived in London, a burning and shining light had suddenly burst upon the moral world. His voice was sweet, full, and musical, and the massive crowds that Spurgeon drew by open-air preaching led Magoon to title his biography of Spurgeon the Modern Whitefield. But how was Charles viewed by the people, the least of these whom he ministered in his blighted community? In 1855, one anonymous writer in the Voice of the People wrote that Mr. Spurgeon institutes a new era, more correctly revives the old good style of Bunyan, Wesley, and Whitefield. When his burning eloquence carried conviction to the hearts of the hearers, men who cared not for the applause of their fellow mortals, but did all for God's glory. Indeed, Charles gave fresh voice to the stream of rich theology which flowed through Calvin, Owen, Bunyan, Edwards, and Wesley, and Whitefield. He knew that Christ had not commanded him to feed my giraffes, but rather to feed my sheep. Thus, in preaching, he insisted that we must not put the photo on a high rack by our fine language, but use great plainness of speech. And Charles did speak plainly and often upon his favorite theme, Jesus Christ and Him crucified. Indeed, it is for his richly theological, exceptionally vivid, and dogmatically charismatic preaching for which Charles Spurgeon is known. But Charles was not just a preacher, he also a college president. In 1856, he founded the Pastors' College, a free seminary designed to help rough and ready ministers sharpen their skill for the ministry. Within the first 20 years of operation, a student planted 53 new Baptist churches in London, not counting missions around the world or across England. But Charles also serves as an example of theological integrity. Near the end of his life in 1887, downgrade controversy erupted as the theological decay of Britain was exposed. At the time, many had abandoned authority, inspiration, and inerrancy of scriptures, and furthermore, others began to reject boldly the resurrection of Jesus Christ. He saw this decay in the Baptist Union and called for direct response. The drafting of an evangelical statement of faith, however, his call was not heeded, nor was the statement drafted. In the end, Charles submitted his letter of resignation to Baptist Union on October 28, 1887, not only to find himself censured by the same body a few months later. Prophetically, he said, I am quite willing to be eaten by dogs for the next 50 years, but the more distant futures have vindicated me, and today his prophecy rings true. Finally, Charles Spurgeon has simplified the Christian virtue which David Bibbington has termed activism, the passionate belief that the gospel must be expressed in action. In addition to Pastors' College, he also founded a ministry to the prostitutes, a ministry to policemen, 2 orphanages, and 17 almshouses for widows. Research conducted at Spurgeon Library has shown that his net worth ran a huge amount, but only a few amount was left in his bank account. What did Charles do with the amount that was left in the bank account? Well, the answer is simple: invest it in God's kingdom. Orphanage had to be fed, houses or windows subsidized, home rescue society for women suffering from domestic abuse had to be funded somehow. Any one of these qualities, evangelical zeal, theological integrity, or evangelical activism, would have been sufficient to earn Charles recognition as an exemplary Christian man. Yet God was pleased to work all these things through his chronically depressed, arthritic, and gout-smitten servant Charles Gordon Spurgeon. It was not Spurgeon who made Spurgeon great, it was God who made Spurgeon great, or rather, God who magnified his greatness to Spurgeon's weakness. In Spurgeon's words, it was all of grace. Faithfulness to the Lord Jesus Christ above all other things was the chief goal. His remarkable ministry in London would last 38 years before his death in January 31st, 1892, in Menton, France.